At exactly 3:17 hours on March 24, 2026, the screens of the USS Abraham Lincoln's Combat Information Center turned blood red. The Aegis S PY-6 radar arrays, capable of tracking a baseball at 500 kilometers, had just detected 12 simultaneous launch signatures erupting from mobile TELs, transporter erector launchers, concealed in the Zagros mountain passes west of Tehran. Iran's IRGC had done the unthinkable. In the middle of fragile peace negotiations, with Pakistan's foreign minister still on a secure line in Doha, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps activated its Fateh-2 hypersonic missile batteries and pointed them directly at Tel Aviv, 5,000 miles away in Washington. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had just finished telling reporters that talks are productive. She was still at the podium when the Pentagon's crisis hotline lit up. The diplomatic window had just been slammed shut at Mach 15. This wasn't impulsive. This was a calculated trap, a double-bladed strike engineered to humiliate Trump's diplomacy and simultaneously test whether Israel's Arrow 3 and David Sling systems could handle a coordinated multi-axis salvo. Iran's message was unambiguous. Your 15-point plan means nothing. The Strait of Hormuz belongs to us. And until the world accepts that, the war continues. But what Tehran's War Council didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the USS Abraham Lincoln Battle Group had been tracking those TELs for 72 hours. 3 Virginia-class submarines were already repositioned beneath the thermocline. And somewhere in the stratosphere above the Persian Gulf, a pair of B-21 raiders was flying a mission that wouldn't appear in any press briefing for 40 years. What happened in the next 23 minutes would redefine 21st century deterrence. And you will not see it in any mainstream news report. To understand what Iran gambled on March 24th, you have to understand the impossible corner Tehran had backed itself into. The US 15-point proposal, delivered through Pakistani intermediaries just 3 days earlier, demanded total dismantlement of Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, a complete halt to ballistic missile development, and formal relinquishment of Strait of Hormuz jurisdiction to international waters. In exchange, lifted sanctions and civilian nuclear assistance. To the Iranian Supreme National Security Council, this wasn't a peace offer. It was a capitulation document. Iran's counter-program, broadcast on state television like a declaration of war, demanded reparations, sovereignty guarantees, and international recognition of Iranian control over the strait. Washington rejected it within the hour. But here's the tactical calculation the IRGC exploited. The US had publicly paused planned strikes against Iranian power plants to allow diplomacy to breathe. To Tehran's war planners, this wasn't restraint. It was a brief, exploitable window. At 2:40 hours, the IRGC Aerospace Force Commander authorized Operation Sorrow, a coordinated multi-axis missile salvo timed to launch at the precise moment Pakistan's envoy was en route to a second round of talks. Iran was betting that striking during negotiations would fracture US public support, force Congress to demand a ceasefire, and create a fait accompli before American bombers could be retasked. It was a brilliant, ruthless, and ultimately fatal miscalculation. At 03:17 hours, the TELs opened their hydraulic clamps on the Zagros slopes. 12 Fateh-2 hypersonic glide vehicles, capable of maneuvering at Mach 14, defeating conventional radar-guided interceptors, screamed skyward on columns of white fire. Simultaneously, 6 Emad medium-range ballistic missiles launched from fixed silos near Tabriz, ultra-targeting Israeli Air Force Base Nevatim in the Negev desert. At the same time, an Iranian electronic warfare battalion operating from hardened bunkers in Khuzestan province activated its common 99 jamming suite, designed to saturate the GPSL-1/L2, bands across a 400-kilometer radius, rendering American precision munitions effectively blind. And simultaneously, the IRGC Navy activated 3 Ghadir-class midget submarines in the Strait of Hormuz, each preloaded with Hoot supercavitating torpedoes. The message to USS Abraham Lincoln's battle group was direct. If you retaliate, the strait becomes your graveyard. On the Link 16 tactical data network of USS Abraham Lincoln, the composite warfare commander had exactly 7 minutes and 14 seconds before the first Fateh-2 reached Israeli airspace. If you were the admiral commanding that carrier strike group, what would you authorize in those 434 seconds? Leave your answer in the comments below, because what happened next shattered every assumption in Tehran's war game. The US response didn't begin with missiles, it began with silence. While the IRGC command structure expected a scramble of F/A-18F Super Hornets and a flurry of SM-3 Block 2A launches, what they got instead was electromagnetic death. 2 EA-18G Growler aircraft launched from USS Abraham Lincoln's deck at 0318 hours, climbing to 42,000 feet in less than 90 seconds. Their ALQ-249 next-generation jammer pods came online simultaneously, painting the entire operational frequency spectrum across western Iran with a wall of broadband noise. The common 99 jamming suite in Khuzestan, rather than disrupting US GPS signals, found itself being traced back. Using a counter-EW technique called DRFM, Digital Radio Frequency Memory, the Growlers recorded the Iranian jamming frequency, replicated it with a 180-degree phase shift, and fed it back into Iranian transmitters at amplified power. In 5 seconds, Iran had accidentally fried its own jamming antennas. The GPS spectrum cleared across the entire theater. At the same time, 400 kilometers to the west, Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow 3 batteries across Israel were receiving the Growler's Link 16 real-time targeting package. All 18 incoming tracks, 12 Fata-2s, and 6 Emads were distributed across Israel's tiered missile defense architecture with machine precision. Arrow 3 allocated against the hypersonic glide vehicles. David's Sling targeting the Emads in their terminal descent phase. In Beirut's southern suburb, simultaneously, Israeli F-35 Ghadir aircraft executing strikes against Hezbollah launch infrastructure fed its geolocation data of 3 IRGC mobile command vehicles back to the carrier group. The battlefield had become a single, unified kill chain stretching from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, but Iran hadn't played its final card. At 0323 hours, a classified SIGINT intercept from NSA Station Cyprus landed in the carrier air wing 9 intelligence cell aboard USS Abraham Lincoln. Buried within IRGC encrypted command traffic was a single authenticated order, activate scenario Karbala. Under this protocol, Iran would simultaneously trigger coordinated militia uprisings across Iraq and activate sleeper cells against US logistics hubs in Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain. The 3 Ghadir submarines in the strait were not positioned only for deterrence. They were pre-aimed at 3 specific oil tankers, flagged under Saudi, Emirati, and Kuwaiti colors, currently transiting the strait under US Navy escort. If those tankers went down, oil would hit $300 per barrel by morning. The global economy would fracture. The US would face the choice of escalation into full-scale regional war or withdrawal. 18 million barrels of daily oil flow transit the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's bet was that the world's financial markets would do its fighting for it. The admiral aboard USS Abraham Lincoln had 4 minutes to decide. And the decision he made had never been attempted in the history of naval warfare. USS Indiana, SSN 789, a Virginia Block 4 nuclear attack submarine running silent at 200 meters beneath the Strait's thermocline for the past 96 hours, received the ELF-encoded combat order at 0326 hours. 3 words in the authentication burst: execute Poseidon Net. Simultaneously, USS Oregon and USS Montana received separate targeting packages for the 3 Ghadir-class submarines. The Ghadirs were stealthy for their class, but Hoot torpedoes emit a characteristic acoustic transient in the 3 kHz range during targeting system warm-up. USS Indiana's sonar team had been tracking those acoustic spikes for 2 hours. They knew the exact microsecond the Ghadir captains would activate their firing solutions, and that moment had just arrived. At 0327 hours, all 3 Virginia-class submarines executed a synchronized close-range active sonar burst, not to detect, but to incapacitate. The concentrated acoustic energy, 237 decibels at close range, hit all 3 Ghadir submarines simultaneously. Their sonar arrays overloaded, resonant vibration cracked instrument panels. Crew members were thrown against bulkheads. The Hoot targeting systems went dark. All 3 torpedoes, pre-loaded, pre-aimed at the tanker convoy, sat dead in their tubes. Above the surface, USS Gravely and USS Fitzgerald executed intercept geometry at 34 knots, positioning between the tanker convoy and the stunned Iranian submarine formation. The 3 Ghadirs had been neutralized. Not one torpedo fired. But the countdown hadn't stopped. 700 kilometers northeast. To the 12 Fatah II hypersonic glide vehicles entered their terminal dive phase. Arrow 3 kinetic kill vehicles impacted 5 of them at 60-kilometer altitude, closing speeds above Mach 18. 1 Fatah II was degraded but continuing descent. David Sling engaged the 6 Emad ballistic missiles in ripple fire. 4 intercepts confirmed. 2 Emads broke through, impacting Nevatim Air Force Base, destroying a hangar complex and damaging a runway section. The single surviving Fatah II was now at 35 kilometers altitude, diving at Mach 11 toward Tel Aviv. Iron Dome's Tamir interceptors were not designed for hypersonic engagement. They would not fire. The jointly developed Iron Beam high-energy laser system had been tracking the vehicle since launch. In the last 14 seconds of the Fatah II's flight, Iron Beam directed its 100-kilowatt solid-state laser onto the vehicle's guidance section, a sustained 3-second burst. At 0331 hours, the Fatah II deviated 8 degrees from its terminal trajectory and impacted the Mediterranean Sea, 2.3 kilometers west of Tel Aviv's coastline. A 40-meter water column erupted into the pre-dawn sky. 16 Israeli civilians were wounded by glass shrapnel from the shockwave. Nevatim reported 2 killed and 17 wounded from the Emad impacts. Iran had struck Israel in the middle of active peace negotiations. The world was about to see what that cost. At 0334 hours, President Trump authorized CENTCOM's pre-planned retaliation package, Operation Anvil's Edge. B-21 raiders, loitering at 60,000 feet throughout the entire engagement, or released 12 GBU-72 advanced bunker buster munitions, 13,000 pounds each, directly at Fordow, Iran's most deeply buried nuclear facility constructed beneath 80 meters of reinforced granite. Simultaneously, 48 BGM-109 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles launched from USS Gravely, USS Fitzgerald, and 3 additional Arleigh Burke destroyers targeting Emad storage depots in Tabriz, the Fatah II TEL assembly facility in Isfahan, and the IRGC Aerospace Force Command Complex in Lavazan, Tehran. EA-18G Growlers maintained their electronic umbrella for the full 18-minute strike window, ensuring Iran's remaining air defense network saw only ghost tracks and phantom formations on their fire control radars. By 0352 hours, Fordow was no longer a functioning facility. The IRGC command complex in Lavazan was rubble. And Pakistan's foreign minister, watching Al Jazeera in his Doha hotel room in stunned silence, was reaching for his phone to inform Washington that Tehran was requesting a new channel of communication. The immediate aftermath of the March 24th engagement revealed the depth of Iran's strategic error. By striking during negotiations, Iran had not fractured U.S. resolve, it had crystallized it. Trump's hold on strikes against Iranian power plants was immediately lifted. The G7 emergency session convened in Paris on March 26th, with Secretary Rubio pressing allies to commit naval assets to Strait of Hormuz escort operations, noting that European and Asian nations depend far more on that waterway than the United States does. On the Ukraine front, as these events unfolded, Russia launched its largest drone and missile strike package of the war. Over 1,000 strike vehicles targeting Ukrainian positions from Kharkiv to Zaporizhzhia, capitalizing on the world's attention being anchored to the Persian Gulf. Russian forces captured Shevyakovka, continued pressure along the Sumy axis, and inflicted heavy losses across 4 Ukrainian oblasts. Kremlin officials attempted to tie U.S. aggression against Iran to the breakdown of Ukraine peace negotiations, a narrative Rubio publicly dismissed at Joint Base Andrews. The world in the final week of March 2026 had become something that no pre-war strategist had adequately modeled, a simultaneous multi-theater confrontation across 3 continents where a decision made in the Strait of Hormuz resonated within hours on the frozen trenches of the Donbass. Iran rejected America's 15-point plan, but America's response made clear that when the language of war interrupts the language of peace, there are consequences. The specter of wider conflict has not been extinguished. It has only been temporarily compressed. forced beneath the surface, like the 3 Ghadir-class submarines now limping back toward Bandar Abbas with cracked instrument panels and dead sonar arrays. And somewhere in the depths of the Strait of Hormuz, USS Indiana is still running silent. The question is no longer whether Iran will negotiate. The question is how much more Iran is willing to lose before it does.